Good evening and welcome to election 2014. Tonight is the fourth in our series of live debates in the lead up to the coming general election. Well, what a week it has been. More commentary on the dirty politics book, National Party ministers running out of chances, and leaders out there kissing babies and becoming experts at taking selfie photos with their numerous fans. Without wanting to mimic Simon Galt talking about the tempo in the MasterChef kitchen, election tempo is boiling over. However, each week I ask the question, how well do you, the viewer, know your candidate? What do they stand for? And how effective will they be if elected to represent their electorate, that's your electorate, in the next government? Each week on election 2014, on an electorate by electorate basis, we are joined by the candidates looking to represent their respective electorate in the coming term. We discuss the issues in the electorate and the wider Canterbury region. It's just a little under 3 weeks until voting day, and we want you to be better informed when you cast your vote. This week we're joined with candidates in the Christchurch Central electorate. The seat has been a Labour safe seat from 1946 until 2011, when the seat was won by National candidate Nikki Wagner. Start with welcoming National candidate, sitting MP Nikki, to the show this evening.
Good evening.
I'd also like to welcome Conservative Party Michael Cook. Good evening, Michael.
Good evening, Tim. Cheers.
I also extend a welcome to Dora Langsbury, who is standing in for David Morehouse. Hello, Dora.
Kia ora.
And I finally welcome Labour Party candidate Tony Milne.
Hi Tim, thanks for having us.
Good evening and thank you all for coming along. Now, consistent with the format of each week's debate, I would like each candidate to tell you about themselves at a personal level. Talk about their experience and their alignment with the parties that they represent. So this is an opportunity for you to hear from the candidate what they stand for and who they are. Each candidate will have 90 seconds, and tonight I'll start with Tony Milne. Now, this was a Labour safe seat and it was grabbed by National in this last election. Tell the viewers why they should vote for you and what will be different under a Labour in this electorate.
Thanks, Tim. Well, I grew up in Invercargill. My mum was a cleaner and she worked at KFC for 20 years. My dad left school when he was 16 and he worked at the West Plains Abattoir. So I came from a family that didn't have a lot of money, but my parents worked really hard to give my brother, my sisters and I opportunities. And that's where my political beliefs come from. I believe that every child in New Zealand, regardless of their background, the kind of home that they grew up in, should have the very best opportunity to make something of their lives. I moved here 14 years ago to go to university, the first in my family, and I've spent the last 10 years working in the health sector. The last 6 years of that as the National Manager of Public Health for the Problem Gambling Foundation. So I've worked with people who have hit rock bottom in their lives, and I've supported them to transform their lives and to transform their local community as well. In the Christchurch Central electorate, I've been a voice around flooding issues in the Flockton Basin and the Beckenham Loop. I've been a voice for more housing, more affordable, warm, dry housing, and I've been a voice on the EQC insurance mess. I've been a voice for saving Phillipstown School and Centennial Pool as well. I can't promise that I will win every battle, but I can promise that I will listen to you and I'll stand up for you. That's why I'm asking for your vote on the 20th of September.
Thank you, Tony. Dora, I'd like to hear from you.
Kia ora koutou. I'm the Green Party candidate for Te Taitonga, and I am also a Green Party list candidate who owns a broken TC3 IVF home in Salisbury Street, just down the road from Nikki. Our Christchurch Central candidate, David Morehouse, is unable to appear this evening due to a pre-existing family commitment, and so I've had the opportunity to come here and talk as a fellow member of the Christchurch Central electorate. Both David and I live in the electorate, and we both have been very active members of our local community, especially post-quake. David successfully led the protest to stop toxic materials being dumped within this electorate after the February quake. I work as a student support advisor at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa, and so my job is to awhi many of our students, both with their learning but also with their challenges with their learning due to the earthquakes. And I've also been heavily involved in a number of inner city resident and NGO initiatives and submissions about how to rebuild our city so that as to ensure that it is livable, affordable and sustainable. The Green Party stands for a greener, fairer and smarter rebuild that puts the needs of Christchurch people first. We stand for communities making decisions about priority projects and the spending on them. We stand for public ownership of Christchurch assets. Cantabrians need better transport, warmer homes and return to local democracy. The rebuild projects that they can afford and to put the needs of Christchurch people first. A Green Party vote will get you a fairer society, a smarter economy and cleaner rivers, and 2 members of Parliament for Christchurch Central. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Michael.
Thanks, Tim. Good evening, Canterbury. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. It's a pleasure to be standing for the Conservative Party in the Christchurch Central electorate. I'm a Cantabrian, born and bred in Christchurch. I work at Lincoln University supporting students with special needs, and I also work as a youth worker in the Richmond-Shirley area, which is where I live. I'm actually a disillusioned voter, disillusioned because of the antics I've seen over the years in Parliament, and that's why I'm standing for the Conservative Party. How is it right that all of the citizens-initiated referenda that have been presented to government by the people have been ignored? That's not right. Myself and the Conservative Party believe that referendums should be binding. How is it right that the gap between rich and poor continues to extend? It's not right. Myself and the Conservative Party believe that everyone's first $20,000 in income should be tax-free. And how is it right that criminals seem to be favoured over their victims? That too's not right. Myself and the Conservative Party stand for justice for victims. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally to you, Nikki.
Good evening. I'm Canterbury born and bred, and I've lived and worked and brought up my children in Christchurch Central. For the last 9 years as a local MP, I've worked hard to make Christchurch Central a better place for all of us to live. And it's been tough, particularly since the earthquakes. My office alone has had over 4,000 constituent cases since September 2010. First of all, it was about survival, water, power, portaloos. Then it led on to things like housing, EQC and insurance, and lately, of course, it's been the terrible flooding. We're getting to the really tough end of the cases now. We're getting less of them, but it's requiring all our experience and all our networks to get really good outcomes. But that's only part of the job. The other part is to look to the future and the rebuild of our city. It has been so tough in our city that we need to make sure that we make the most of every opportunity that comes our way. And there's plenty of them coming. With $40 billion being spent in the city over the next decade or so, there are plenty of jobs, wages are up, and best of all, great training opportunities for our young people. We're on the way to build a stronger, safer, more sustainable and more people-friendly city. And on top of that, build the foundation for Christchurch for the next 140 years. I ask you for your vote to help me do that.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Thank you, candidates, for telling us about yourself and giving the viewers the opportunity in the luxury of their own home to hear what you personally stand for and what your histories are. We're going to have to take a short break. When we return, we're talking about the economy and looking at it from a Christchurch Central electorate perspective. Don't go far.
Years ago, Mum and Dad's home was built by Fowlers. I remember how proud the builder was. Now, years later, Fowlers are building my own home. And our builder has that same pride in everything he does. Because at Fowlers, their people make the difference. Generation after generation.
Your style of living, your style of builder. Fowler Homes.
Welcome back to election 2014, where we're distilling party policies from the propaganda and identifying the important issues for the Canterbury region in the lead up to the coming general election. Before the break, we learned about the candidates at a personal level, their alignments with the parties they represent. Now let's look at an important issue, which is the economy in the Christchurch Central electorate. Economic indicators are that the local economy is hot and helping in part to support the national economy. Now, I'm going to start with Tony Milne, and I want to talk about one thing, which is about tax increases. You know, it's been raised that potentially taxes may increase. Now, stats show that top 5% of the households pay 47% of the net tax, and households under 60,000 annual income receive more in welfare than they're actually paying in the tax. Now, what are your views on this, and how can we support that moving forward?
Well, firstly, it's important to acknowledge that in the middle of a global financial crisis, one of the key decisions the current government made was to cut taxes. Now that, in my view, is economically reckless, particularly when we have a gap growing between the rich and the poor. We must ensure that any recovery of our economy, and we are starting to see one, we must ensure that any economic recovery is a fair one and that the gains of that recovery are fared fairly across the population. So yes, we will increase taxes on those who earn more than $150,000 a year. We think that's the fair thing to do, and we're going to invest that extra $1 billion that we get from that revenue into health and into education, into housing and into social support for families. We think that's the fair thing to do when we see this growing gap between the rich and the poor in this country.
Okay. So can I ask you one question there? When you're talking about the lower tax and the lower income, what is the view from Labor around the secondary tax?
We're going to get rid of secondary tax. What we've seen is a lot of casualisation of the workforce. We now see a lot of people having to work 2, 3 jobs to make ends meet, and they're getting secondary tax on that second and third job. So we're going to scrap the secondary tax, and that's going to make a real difference for a lot of lower income people, particularly those who are working 2 or 3 jobs.
But they'll still have to pay the same amount of tax, won't they? It's just a timing issue.
It's going to make it much easier for those people, because a lot of them, there's a lot of compliance costs of having to put in an application to get the tax back, so it's going to simplify the process for them.
But it's a timing issue. They get it in their hand when they earn it.
And also, the IRD is also working on this policy already of real-time taxation. So it's something that's underway. It's a project that's underway and committed to by the present government.
It's taking too long, and a Labor government will do it immediately when we're elected.
Yep.
Dora, I'm going to ask you, today's topical. It's an hour off the press. You probably knew it was going to come up.
I was listening to it as I drove in on the national radio.
Let's talk about minimum wage. Yes. $18 per hour, with a minimum going to $15 after the election. I've got to ask the question. We're seeing a lot of businesses struggle in the environment, in the economy today. You know, has it been modelled? Has it been factored in? Can, you know, the money would be good in the coffers, but can we support it as a business economy?
One of the things we are proud of as the Green Party is everything that we're putting forward as financials has been modelled, has been priced out and is showing a surplus. But one of the things I really enjoyed when I was listening to Materia on the radio coming over, and they were actually interviewing someone from a small Wairarapa town, and they were talking about how most of the people who live in that area actually earn the minimum wage, which means that most of the businesses actually don't benefit because people don't have a lot of additional income. Whereas it's actually a well-known fact that the more money that you're able to give people, then the more money they're able to spend, and so all the businesses in the community actually benefit. So it isn't just people being able to have more food and being able to have things for their children, for their education, but also all the businesses actually get the benefit of that additional money.
But the question I've got is, there's a cost to a business of employing, and if you're suddenly throwing on, you know, potentially $3 an hour just like that within 2 years, without the ability to increase the price in the market, we're up against $1 if we're exporting. You know, I've got to ask the question: is businesses will fold?
No, because they may not be able to increase the price, but they certainly should be able to increase the turnover.
Turnover of
the products that they're selling, because there is more disposable income in the economy to be able to
for those who are looking at a local economy, but those that are in an international economy exporting, and we're a country of export, those parties can't just put up their prices because of the fact that the wages and the supply and the cost of labour's gone up.
But that's always been a factor for our economy anyway. I mean, if you just look at the dairy prices, they go up and down all the time. So as businesses, that's one of the things that you're always needing to factor in. But one of the things that we're most concerned about is ensuring that we stimulate the local economy and local businesses, and also ensuring that people have a better quality of life.
And isn't it interesting that we always talk about how it's unaffordable to lift incomes at the lower end, but we never say it's unaffordable to lift incomes at the upper end in terms of chief executive salaries, the salaries at the top. Now, this is about making sure that if you work a full-time week, you should be able to make ends meet. And so many people in our country are working hard and they can't pay the bills at the end of the week because they're on $14.25, even when they're working tough jobs, skilled jobs, and that's not good enough in our country. We have to do better than that. We have to lift incomes at the lower end.
I think the issue here is that we do want to lift incomes, and that's why the national government has increased the minimum wage every year. But the point is, we want to walk a fine line so people still keep their jobs. And I know that Treasury has modelled the 1885
before you actually lift incomes to a decent
the
level.
1885 to say that 21,000 jobs will be lost. Now,
most
most people would prefer to have a job.
Nikki.
Most people would prefer to have a job, even if it's not paid as well, than to have it to lose their job. And 21,000 people losing their jobs. Yes, we've created 83,000 jobs in the last year, and we're planning to go on to 170,000 in the next 2 years. But we can't afford to lose 20,000 jobs just like that.
No, the Treasury modelling says that that's not the case. When Labor was in government last time, we increased the minimum wage significantly every year that Labor was in office, and unemployment went down every year that Labor was in government.
It all depends
because
on
the money
context
circulates
of the
in the local
situation.
economy. It's better if you lift incomes at the lower end because it's spent in the local economy, in the local dairy, in the local supermarket.
If you follow that logic, why don't we just pay everybody $25 an hour? Because then they'd have more money to spend and we'd all make more money.
Well, it's about lifting incomes at the lower end and actually thinking about...
There's no logic.
There is, but I do like the $25 an hour, and I think
viewers will be loving that one.
Or maybe $100 an hour. If we all make money by paying people more,
That's probably what Nikki is.
we're going to keep it to $25 an hour minimum wage.
I think, obviously, the key issue here is that as you lift wages, you have to lift productivity. Otherwise, you can't afford to pay them.
But we have been lifting productivity, and wages haven't been moving
well, wages
in relation.
have gone up.
And the key issue here is we have 260,000 children living in poverty. They're going to school with no food in their bellies. They're going to school with no lunch. That's the issue in our country.
Is, people are better off in work than out of work. Not just for earning an income, but also for having a routine and being part of society and contributing,
even though their parents are in work.
Role models
the only
children.
pathway to improve that is lifting incomes at the lower end.
Okay, I'm going to ask Michael, who's been very silent on this, Conservative Party view around the economy?
Conservative Party view, Tim, would be, well, it's simplicity really. As far as we can talk about wages and what they should be. And our response would be, well, look at the taxes, and we've done our figures, and we believe that the first $20,000 for everyone should be tax-free. And to us, that's simple, it's affordable, we believe. Otherwise, we would have put it up higher. But it's targeted because $20,000 to somebody who's on $30,000 is a lot. Yeah.
And where does that fit with a minimum wage? Do you still have a minimum wage threshold as well that goes with that?
I think at the moment you focus on what the government can do, and then you work from there.
And also, you're talking of a flat tax after that. What percentage would your flat tax be?
Well, that's the challenge. Not being in government, we're not open to the Treasury
well, flat tax
figures,
has always been...
and so we have to work out. It's only once we're in power that we're open to the figures, and that we can actually set what that figure would be.
But it is possible to do modelling, and we've done that with our budget that we've just produced, and it's been fully, rigorously checked over.
Generally speaking, people consider flat taxes benefit the rich rather than the poorer people.
Right.
I think it's time for us to take a short break. We've had an interesting discussion on taxes. We've had an interesting discussion on minimum wages. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the economy. We're going to talk about the, but also in the respect of the rebuild. We're going to talk about some of the assets, the convention centre. We're going to talk about some of the stimulation of the central city from the commercial sector. So please don't go far. Take a short break and we'll be right back.
Years ago, Mum and Dad's home was built by Fowlers. I remember how proud the builder was. Now, years later, Fowlers are building my own home. And our builder has that same pride in everything he does. Because at Fowlers, their people make the difference. Generation after generation.
Your style of living, your style of builder. Fowler Homes.
Welcome back to election 2014. Before the break, we heard from candidates looking to represent the Christchurch Central electorate in the next government, and we heard on their views around the health of the economy. Now, I would like to talk about post-earthquake recovery. We're going to split it into the next two sections. The first one, we're going to talk about commercial property and the way that businesses recovered. Now, I'm going to start with Nikki on this one. Now, Nikki, there's tower cranes in the city. There's a lot of activity in the construction sector. It's very difficult to get tradespeople, carpenters, the likes to work because we are absolutely smoking in the city. How do you feel, and where is National at, and what do we expect in the next 3 years?
Yep. Well, Christchurch, of course, is the second largest city in the country. It's the gateway to the South Island. It's an export capital, and it's done really well during and after the earthquakes. Unbelievably, our broken port kept on shipping goods, our manufacturing sector kept on working, and new businesses have opened up. I think the best thing that the government did after the earthquakes was provide wages for businesses that were broken, and that's kept those businesses turning over, and since then we've added 11,000 extra new businesses. So there's lots of jobs, there's lots of work happening, we're seeing wages go up, and we are leading the country in terms of a really profitable, prosperous, hard-working economy. I think that will continue. $40 billion is being spent here over the next decade. I think we need to make sure that we make the most of every opportunity, but we also have to think beyond the rebuild. We have to think about our economy going forward, and that's why we're focusing on things like the innovation precinct, education and research for health, creative industries and new businesses, because that's the foundation for the future. That will make us a diverse, vibrant, wonderful place for our young people to live and work.
Michael.
Well, I'd have to say, as a servant, supposedly as a servant of the people, the government should be looking to make sure that any unnecessary regulation and any unnecessary compliance costs which are involved in the commercial redevelopment of the central city should be eliminated, because I believe we believe there's a lot of money being lost in that area. I also think, as far as the people of Christchurch go, the business industry, there's onus on them to actually perform, to build, to redevelop in a way which is sympathetic with how the people of Christchurch would like to see that done, because they've had a lot of say into ideas, the share an idea through the City Council, and I think it's up to the commercial sector to step up now and not just provide for themselves, but to spend their money in areas which will actually also provide for the local people.
It's a difficult one though when you're asking private sector to invest with their own capital and you're asking others to have input into the outcomes. I mean, it's a very different, it's a fine line where you're asking for personal money to be invested, but input from those without the control of that capital.
I think the public had a really good say with the Share an Idea event. We got something like 30,000 ideas, and that's been the basis of the blueprint, which of course is the public buildings and the anchor projects. And so I think that was really the appropriate thing to do. But you're right about business, but they're getting on with it. There's nearly 200 businesses actually building in the centre city right now.
Share an Idea, though, was a moment in time with post-it notes on a wall. Now, it was a great initiative for getting people aligned to their issues, but have we had the follow-on from that?
Well, I think part of that, the stakeholders have continued that discussion. It was all brought together and it has underpinned the blueprint. The issue that we've learned from international disasters is that you have to come up with a plan and you have to stick to that plan. Yes, you can perhaps modify the timing, but you need to have something that everybody buys into, everybody bought into the blueprint, and you just got to keep it moving through the process. Otherwise it all unravels, and we've seen in New Orleans they've had 3 plans and they're actually back worse than we are.
Dora?
Yeah, I suppose I've got a strong background in project management, and one of the things that I do know is you do need to keep monitoring the plan all the time, and one of the things that I find very sad and frustrating is that once the new council came in and we found out that there wasn't the same money available, that there wasn't the same opportunity to re-look at the plan and actually change some priorities, because we do really need a very vibrant inner city, and I know that I live and I work in the inner city and I really want it to be there again. And I know for me, having some of the anchor projects like the stadium or the convention centre would be great eventually, but they're really just event and tourist destination opportunities. What we need first is actually, the government departments back in there, the doctors, the cafes, the retail, all those other things that really are what everyday people use for a city. But also we need a really good smart transport system, because one of the things that CCDU is trying to do is minimise the number of cars in the city. But again, we don't believe as the Green Party that the regional transport plan is adequate, and so one of the reasons why we're looking to move 50% of the regional 50% of the national spend on transport into the regions is to actually try and ensure that places like Christchurch can get a really sophisticated integrated transport system so that we can actually achieve what the plan is, which is to reduce the number of cars that are in the city.
Tony, transport today. We saw the plans for it was about 100 million being spent into the transport.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of our economy, a lot of productivity is being lost because people are stuck in congestion. The earthquake has meant a lot of people have shifted out into the Rangiora, Kaiapoi and Rolleston areas. So we've announced 2 phases to a commuter rail transport program. The first is $100 million of reallocated roading funding into a public transport network from Rangiora, Kaiapoi into the city to get rid of some of the congestion.
What roading are you going to stop building?
Well, the roads of national significant projects, which in the Treasury analysis shows that there's actually no benefit to some of those projects.
That's not
and
true.
it's actually pork-barrel politics in some of the regions in New Zealand. That's what we're going to reallocate.
The roads of national significance
and our second phase is
keep
going
our economy
from Rolleston
right
into the city. And that's because the huge growth of population into those areas, the productivity lost of people stuck in traffic, it will free up the roads for those who use cars as well. And we're going to have feeder bus systems and integrated cycling as well. And that's really important in terms of, this is a policy not for the next year or 10 years. This is a century-long policy. This is going to make a significant difference.
I've got a question. You deliver people from the areas north and potentially the areas west into the central hub.
Yep.
What are we doing with them then?
Well, firstly, the other thing is that it will create economic growth and development in those areas as well. So we're going to have feeder bus systems and we're going to create stations along the way. And in the second phase, we're going to have a link into the Morehouse station and linked up with the bus exchange.
So the question was that modelling's been done. I think ECAN said no. There's been a lot of people looked at light rail. The economics aren't there. We are a city of some marginal, I guess, population to support it. Has the work been done? And is this going to be another expensive project that can't deliver a return, or is it actually able to be supported?
There are actually a lot of studies into this which show it is feasible. We talked to transport experts in Christchurch and around New Zealand to develop the policy, and we know that it is economically feasible to do it. And as I say, it's a century-long program. We're going to create it in the next year, but it's something that will make a difference in the long term, especially as oil starts to increase in price.
So this is a novel concept, but if it's a century-long project, it's likely that there will be a number of parties holding the baton through that period. I mean, is there something that really needs to be multi-party? And this, we can maybe broker a deal across multiple parties on this channel.
I think that's one of the things that came up in one of your previous debates as well, is that when the earthquake first happened, all the parties agreed that they actually wanted to work together on the rebuild of Christchurch, and there was an opportunity then, and I think that that opportunity still exists, and especially if we get a change of government, then there'll definitely be a group of parties that are all with very similar policies and this hopefully can take the
This is just
forward.
A drop in the bucket in terms of funding compared to some of the roading projects around the place.
I think it's really interesting in terms of public transport, because I think everybody would agree we'd like to have good public transport coming into the city. But the problem is that there has to be a change in behaviour and a change in attitude before we do that. Right now, the ECAN report said that there are 10,000 cars going across the bridge at peak hour, and 80% of them have one person in them, and 440 people go on public transport. So the point is that we really need to get a very big headspace change of behaviour before people are going to support it. And the way that that's normally done internationally is what they do is they set up a really good bus system to get people onto public transport until they get the volume that they can afford a train. A bus costs something like $300,000, a train costs $6 million. And right around the world we have examples of light rail and rail that's cost an arm and a leg. So the point is you need to develop the behaviours and the attitudes and the people wanting to use public transport before you put the millions and millions of dollars behind it.
We also have to make sure that we're designing a city such that there are the destinations.
Exactly.
And so by trying to concentrate back into the inner city, I mean, that's why my preference is to see businesses and other things that have people working there rather than spending money on large things that take large areas, but you only have people using them occasionally. You know,
so
if you're going to get that concentration...
The city plan that's there is designed to tie in with the bus exchange and bring people into the city.
But we've got to get that concentration of people living and working back in the inner city.
And those residential areas in the green
Nikki's approach is to walk the line on everything. That's a conservative approach, whether it's the minimum wage or addressing rail issues. We'd never do anything if we just waited and see.
No, we wouldn't. We would have incremental improvement and we wouldn't waste an awful lot of money on something that people aren't ready for.
Well, the issues are too important to wait for incremental improvement.
Sometimes after an event like this, you have to be able to take a strong leadership position and say, it's time to do something different. We have an opportunity to be able to do something. That's the blueprint. It's a strong leadership position. It's got anchor projects. It's got the whole city behind it, and that's what's happening. Doesn't have the whole city.
It does not have the whole city behind it.
Well, that's what they said.
Your government put the Share an Idea project into the rubbish bin.
No,
and
they did not.
Absolutely
not. You just need to follow the process that went from the blueprint.
Said they wanted rail.
Share an Idea.
The public said they wanted more cycle lanes and they wanted them quickly.
And tonight the public saying they don't want to sell the assets, which they're being forced to do to be able to build the anchor project.
I'm not sure if $500 million covered rugby stadium was in the original Share an Idea.
That's the City Council's decision, and
that was in your blueprint, Nikki.
But that was put there and it's shared out. We're not. The City Council is paying for the stadium. The council is paying for the stadium and they can choose to put it in a longer length of time if they want to. We've already built them a temporary one that they can use in the meantime. So there is some flexibility in the system. But the point is we need to have a plan and stick to it. Otherwise we'll end up unravelling like New Orleans, which 9 years later is behind where we are.
Flexibility.
Absolutely.
We've got to stick with the plan.
Yes, stick with the plan. No, that's not. You can be flexible as you stick to a plan.
And it's hard to
we're going to have to call up into a break now. Going to call up into a break, go pay some bills. When we return, we'll be talking about residential housing, repairs, EQC and flooding.
Years ago, Mum and Dad's home was built by Fowlers. I remember how proud the builder was. Now, years later, Fowlers are building my own home. And our builder has that same pride in everything he does. Because at Fowlers, their people make the difference. Generation after generation.
Your style of living, your style of builder. Fowler Homes.
Welcome back to Election 2014. Before the break, we discussed, we argued about the post-earthquake recovery in the commercial sector within the electorate. We're looking at the Christchurch Central electorate this evening. Let's talk about housing, and I'm specifically going to start with the flooding issue. And Dora, I'm going to turn to you first on this one.
Is that because I used the IVF thing before? This is probably where I go off script for a little bit and just talk personally about the frustration, because one of the things that is in our policy is about making sure that when we rebuild with climate resilience. And I happen to be one of those people that got the letter that says that when I get rebuilt, I'll be in an IVF area. Unfortunately, because we're getting rebuilt before the new district plan is in, we don't get rebuilt at the new height. And our insurance company said that that would be great. They would build us at the new height, but could we each give them an extra $20,000 to do that, which of course we just don't have that money. And so I think that's one of the things I found quite frustrating. And again, when we talk about leadership positions, is actually to sort of say, we've figured this one out. The council's been able to give us all pre-warning, but there isn't a mechanism that actually says to the insurance companies, we now know that these houses have to be built this little bit higher. When you rebuild them, can you please rebuild them at that higher height? So now what could happen is I could have an insurance implication that says that when I'm rebuilt, I actually won't be insurable or I'll have to pay an increased excess because of that. And so that personally for me is one of those frustrations that we need to take leadership on climate resilience, especially when it comes to flooding and the rebuild. Kia ora.
Well, most of the flooding that's happening in Christchurch is in the Christchurch Central electorate. So we have both the Flockton Basin and also the Beckenham Loop after the boundary changes. There are some really complex issues to be worked through, and it's a combination of the council with its task force report, and they're showing some great leadership around what they're doing and the long-term land remediation solutions. But I think government has a role to play as well. And recently EQC sent letters to residents in the Flockton Basin saying that they were not at increased flood vulnerability as a result of the earthquake. Well, yeah, right. We know the land in that area has dropped from 20 to 60 centimetres. They are at increased flood vulnerability because of the earthquake. So Labor has said, if necessary, we will change the law to make it clear that EQC does have an obligation to assist both with land remediation and support for the families in terms of temporary emergency accommodation and potentially government buyout offers as well for the most seriously affected from flooding.
Michael.
Tim, as far as the Conservative Party is concerned, the key thing again being the government being a servant of the people. There's a lot of challenging work going out there. I think the most important thing is to ensure that there's good communication going on with the people in those areas, those affected areas. Good communication, not just communication, but actually active support of those people, because the decisions are difficult. The science is challenging. There's a lot of technical people
working on it. We know that the ground's sunk. We know that it's flooding and it wasn't before the earthquake.
That's right.
It's quite simple. I mean, we've got Nikki, solutions?
But it's about how you present that information to the people and then how you support them through it, through the decisions that have to be made.
Yeah. But even when your house is having to be getting rebuilt at a lower level than it needs to be because the rules are such that the insurance company only has to build you at that level, even though we've been told by the City Council that when the plan comes through, it's a higher level than it needs to be at. I mean, there's that kind of dilemma that's going on. I mean, I can understand rules and I can understand being the servant and I understand that I've been informed, but I still, it just...
Want a solution.
Yeah, it saddens me that I'm actually getting a house built that's actually going to be vulnerable to flooding.
It's a leaky house syndrome waiting to come in 20 years' time.
And I've already owned a leaky house in Christchurch.
So what's happening around here, of course, is that the City Council takes the lead on flooding, but the Prime Minister himself has actually promised, and Jerry Brownlee at EQC, to work behind them to help fund the solution that's going to come out of this. To talk to the people in the meantime, we have managed to have what they call the CTAS, which is the earthquake emergency accommodation payment paid to those people who are out of their houses if they haven't got any insurance, so that's being paid at the moment. And the next thing to do is they're creating a hub in the areas so people can bring their information, they can have experts there, they can look at each individual house and they can come out for a solution. And they're going right through, the moment they're going through a declaratory judgment at the court so that everyone knows what EQC is required to pay and so that there's no cases later than that. So everybody knows what's expected and make sure that EQC delivers what's supposed to deliver. So we're on the way to that.
People shouldn't have to take EQC to court to sort this out. EQC should actually be a people-focused organisation that makes the right decision in the first place, rather than people having to put money that they don't have because they're struggling with flooding, and to take our own government agency to court.
Has to get clarified by the court. So the point is they are going to the declaratory judgment, but some people have decided that they wanted to join. No, because they don't know what the right decision is. We've already had a decision with EQC, with the insurance companies, about paying for appropriation over each different case. It's never happened in the past before. They went to court. The court said EQC has to pay out for each different claim, and therefore that's never happened before. They never had to do it before, and now the court's done that. So EQC agreed and said, yes, we will deliver what we're required to deliver. This is the same situation. We've never had a case of land under these circumstances. We don't know what the correct way the law is going to be. We're going to clarify it before we start so that nobody else has to go back and relitigate it again.
That's a bunch of nonsense, Nikki.
Well, that's, I think that's a smart thing to do.
My house is being
the smart thing to do would be
EQC
to support those families to start off with.
Don't allow it to be built at the correct level. So I'm sitting there thinking, what's going to happen with EQC?
This is not, that's the council's district plan, obviously. That's not
the council's
EQC.
district.
That's not
but
EQC.
What I'm saying is, in the future, when I flood, and they're going to say you weren't built at the new flood level, we won't cover you.
We've had too much of this.
Sorry, Tony. I think what Don is highlighting is the fact that traditionally for government, good communication is telling people clearly what we're doing. But actually good communication is about feedback from the people and using that feedback into decision making. It's a bit like the citizens-initiated referenda not being listened to. It comes back to good communication, which is actually a two-way thing. And I think we have to promote that in government, and we also have to promote that in local government.
But it also comes down to good decision making. And this is just another example where people are having to take our own government to court. It happened with the bare land case, which the government lost. They then appealed to give the government offer of 50% of the bare land, and the court said it should be 100% offer on the bare land, and the government is now appealing that. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. They should just make the right decisions in the first place. Okay,
thank you very much. We're going to take a short break. When we return, we're going to ask the candidates, from a party perspective, what they will do if elected into to represent the Christchurch Central electorate in the next term of government. And we're also going to ask them the question at the end of the evening, which is, what will keep them awake at night if elected? Thank you. Don't go far. We'll be right back.
Years ago, Mum and Dad's home was built by Fowlers. I remember how proud the builder was. Now, years later, Fowlers are building my own home. And our builder has that same pride in everything he does. Because at Fowlers, their people make the difference. Generation after generation.
Your style of living, your style of builder. Fowler Homes.
Welcome back to Election 2014. Before the break, we talked about the recovery, residential housing and flooding, which all appear to be linked. It's now time, at the end of the show, we're coming up to the end of the show, to ask the candidates what they will do over the first 3 years if elected. So what's the first thing they're going to do if elected, and what are they going to continue to do through that term? The other question that I like to ask each candidate is, what are the issues, or what is the single issue or the main issue that will keep them awake at night? I'm going to start with you on this one, Tony.
Well, I'm passionate about Christchurch, and I'm passionate about the Christchurch Central electorate and making this place even better than it's ever been before. And I think we have a real opportunity to do that post-earthquake. New Zealand should be the fairest, most decent society in the world. And we have the chance to do that by focusing on the issues that matter to you and your family. Labour will put people first. We will make sure that there's more affordable homes. We'll make sure that there's more jobs and higher incomes, and that our kids get the very best start in life. If elected the MP for Christchurch Central, I have 3 priorities: climate change, inequality, and a people-focused rebuild of Christchurch. And that includes dealing with the housing crisis, EQC insurance issues, and the flooding in the Flockland Basin and the Beckenham Loop. I believe that we can do better by our children living in poverty. We can do better by our children by ensuring they have rivers that they can swim in. And we can do better by our children by ensuring that every child has a warm, dry, affordable home to live in. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to stand up for you. That's why I'm asking for your vote on the 20th of September.
Thank you, Tony. To you, Dora.
I think it's probably quite obvious one of the things that's making me not sleep at night, and that's the rebuild of Christchurch with the lack of climate resilience there. My electorate actually is wider than just Christchurch, it's Te Taitonga, and as Māori we are very coastal people, so for me it's a relevant issue not just here in Christchurch, where it's central where I live, but now where I live out at Christchurch East and Central New Brighton, and also where we have family down at Otako. So that is definitely something that I want to see leadership taken on, is climate resilience with rebuilding. But a party vote for the Green Party will give you 2 central Christchurch MPs. David Morehouse is 21st on the Green Party list, and by giving your party vote to the Green Party, you'll get an electorate MP and David Morehouse as your Green Party list MP. The Green Party is committed to a fairer society, a smarter economy and cleaner rivers. The Green Party is also committed to a sustainable rebuild of Christchurch, where families and communities are at the heart of our rebuild. Our warmer homes, schools as hubs and progressive home ownership are some of our policies that will put whānau back at the heart of our rebuild. The Green Party has listened and heard the plea for an integrated regional transport system, rail, road, buses, cycling and walking. We will return 50% of the national transport budget back to the regions. We have listened and heard the plea for a sustainable, world-class, smart, value-added economy, and our $1 billion research and development policy and our Green Investment Bank will allow us to reinvest in our local and regional entrepreneurs, and we will make our rivers clean enough to swim in and keep our beaches free from oil spills. Party vote Green and you will get 2 Christchurch Central voices in Parliament. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. Michael Cook.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you, Canterbury. Not surprisingly, my goals are the same as the goals of the Conservative Party. And the Conservative Party was established to promote better democracy here in New Zealand, to actually make sure that your vote means something and to actually give back your voice. How is it right that so many people here in the country today say, what does it matter who I vote for? They're all the same. That's not right. The Conservative Party believes that referendums should be binding, that your first $20,000 should be tax-free, and that victims should receive justice and support. If elected, I would certainly stand for listening, for hearing the people of Christchurch Central, and the Conservative Party would like to see that your voice is not just heard on election day, but is continue to be heard throughout the year. And that's where we stand with referendums. So I encourage you not just to vote for me, for stability, for honesty, for integrity, but to vote for the Conservative Party to see that your voice is heard continually over the next 3 years.
Thank you. Nikki, to you.
There's a lot more work to do in Christchurch, and I'm asking for your vote so I can continue to support the people of Christchurch Central, to continue to help them through the aftermath of the earthquakes, but also to make sure that there are good jobs and that their well-being is looked after in terms of education and health. But also, I will use all my energy, all my expertise and all my experience to help the rebuild of our city. We have the opportunity of a lifetime to build a stronger, safer, more sustainable and people-friendly city, and we need to make the most of it. The plans are in place, the work has begun, and I ask for your support to keep it going. We know we have to work together, we have to be focused and disciplined because we're building strong foundations for the Christchurch for the next 140 years. Please vote for me, Nikki Wagner, and Party Vote National.
Thank you very much. Look, in wrapping up, I'd really like to thank the panel for joining me. Labour Labour candidate Tony Milne, Green Party representative for David Woodhouse tonight, Dora Langsbury. Yep. Thank you very much. Michael Cook, Conservative Party candidate, and sitting MP Nikki Wagner for the National Party.
Nice to see you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for coming along. It's been an interesting night. We've talked about housing, we've talked about the economy, we've talked about a lot of issues that are facing the central Christchurch Central electorate. Next week we'll be looking at the Ilam electorate when I will be joined by the National Party MP, Sarah Minister, and National Party candidate the Honourable Jerry Brownlee, Labour Party candidate James Dan, Green Party candidate John Kelcher, Conservative Party candidate John Stringer, and our first Internet Party candidate Beverly Ballantyne. See you next Tuesday, 7 p.m. on CTV for the next live Election 2014 debate.